Welcome to humanistic therapy. So, humanistic, I think, is named because it's human, it's relatable, it feels good, it's very supportive. So, humanistic therapists focus on clients' subjective, conscious experiences. Whereas, remember, in psychodynamic therapy, they focused on unconscious experiences. The focus is on what clients are experiencing in the present, the here and now, not on the past. So psychologist Carl Rogers developed person-centered therapy, and that is a very classic example of humanistic therapy. It's also called client-centered therapy. Now, what this means, person or client-centered, means that the most important person in the room is the client, not the counselor. With psychodynamic therapy, the most important person in the room is the therapist. The therapist is directing and guiding and provoking the client with special techniques to reveal their unconscious. And in behavior therapy, it seems like the most important person in the room is the behavior therapist because they are so actively engaged in helping modify the person's behavior. Whereas in humanistic therapy, the therapist kind of takes a back seat, kind of fades into the background a bit, and lets the client do the important work. So, person-centered therapy, a la Carl Rogers, means the therapeutic relationship frees clients to engage in self-exploration and achieve self-acceptance. Frees clients. So, what the therapist is trying to do is create a safe place for the client to reveal him or herself. It's non-directive in that the client takes the lead. The client decides what to self-disclose and when. There's a lot of reflection because the therapist reflects what the client has said by restating or paraphrasing the client's expressed feelings without interpretation, like you see in psychodynamic therapy, or judgment. So again, it frees the client because you've created a non-judgmental, safe place for the client to tell their truth. So if you are going to be effective as a person-centered therapist, you must have 4 basic qualities. 1, the ability to communicate to your client unconditional positive regard. Now that is unconditional acceptance. There are no conditions. I hold you in positive regard as a fellow human being who has worth and value regardless of how you think, speak, feel, or act. Now think of how incredible this is. So the therapist, let's say you work in a prison. Let's say this person's killed 3 people, and you have to go in there letting them know that they have value as a fellow human being. You can communicate, of course, that you are not happy with their behavior. You disapprove of that behavior. You may disapprove of their attitude about why they killed those people. But as a fellow human being, you have positive regard for them. That's really challenging. You have empathy. You are able to understand someone's experiences and feelings from that person's point of view, not from how the therapist would look at it, but how that person looks at it. So let's say someone is gay and you're not. You need to be able to have the ability to understand their experience from their point of view, not what you think about being gay, but you have to embrace what they think about being gay. Genuineness, you recognize and express your own true feelings as a model for the client to do so as well. So if your client says something that makes you really sad, you don't have to hold back the tears and say, oh, I have to be a professional. I can't show them that this makes me sad. In person-centered therapy, you showing your sadness validates to the client that you understand that what they're expressing is very sad. And congruence. There's a fit or a match between one's thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. So The therapist demonstrates this in the hopes that the client develops this, that your thoughts and your feelings match your behaviors. That's congruence. And that is one of the goals in humanistic therapy, is that people experience a congruence between their thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, their values and their behavior, their ideal and their real. Okay. I think we're going to combine cognitive therapy because that was pretty brief. So cognitive therapy, remember cog, when you see cog, you think of gears inside a person's head, and you think of cognitive means thinking. See those cogs inside their brain. Okay, maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't. A form of therapy that helps clients identify and correct faulty cognitions. Cognitions, thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes, believed to underlie their emotional problems and their maladaptive behavior. So negative emotions caused by interpretations, not actual events. That's how they see it, is that an event is a stimulus and we choose what we believe about it. Therefore, we choose our emotions and we get negative emotions because of our interpretation of an event, not of the actual event. So rational emotive behavior therapy is one of the most popular examples of cognitive therapy. It was proposed by Albert Ellis, who believed that negative emotions such as anxiety and depression, and he called them depression and emotion. A lot of people call depression emotion turned inward, are caused by irrational ways in which we interpret or judge negative events, not by the negative events themselves. So that implies that a person can learn how not to interpret events in a negative way and therefore not have anxiety and depression. So rational emotive behavior therapy, and I really hardly ever heard anyone call it REBT. It's just rational emotive behavior therapy, which is part of cognitive therapy, because rational emotive is feeling and thinking. So it's not an example of behavior therapy. It's a cognitive therapy that influences behaviors. And that is to replace irrational, maladaptive beliefs with alternative, more adaptive beliefs. So, rational emotive behavior therapists help clients substitute more effective interpersonal behavior for self-defeating or maladaptive behavior through managing their irrational, illogical, and self-defeating behavior. So they do a process called cognitive restructuring. This is the primary therapeutic intervention, where A is the activating event, B is the belief about the event, and C is the emotional consequences. There's also a D to this, disputing irrational beliefs, and we'll get into that in class. So, A, activating event. Let's say somebody dies. Your belief about the event. Well, at least they're out of pain. Oh, they're going on to a better place. I'm sad, but I know that there's some good about the fact that they're out of pain and on to a better place. Emotional consequences, reasonable amount of sadness and loss, but also some feeling of relief because you know they're in a better place. Activating event, somebody dies. Belief, I'll never be able to go on without them. They were the only one for me. My life will never be the same. I don't even want to live without that person. Emotional consequence, devastation, prolonged depression and sadness, lack of hope, nothing positive. Okay, so see how dramatic the belief about the event can be in producing the emotional consequences. So what cognitive restructuring helps you do is tell yourself the truth here, because I was being irrational. I can go on without that person. I don't want to go on without that person. Oh, wait, I probably want to live. I just say all these dramatic things because I'm so distraught. So my therapist doing cognitive therapy with me would say, you need to learn how to tell yourself the truth here. The truth is you are really disappointed and sad and uncomfortable because you are saying, You need to say, I am beginning to realize that I am experiencing a great loss because I had great love for that person. And it's going to take me a long time to feel better about this. And I wish my life could be different with them in it. But I will learn to accept that they are not going to be in it. And I will make a commitment to make a good life for myself anyway. So my emotional consequences are still sadness. I might have some depression, but I'm not going to have prolonged, chronic, deep depression when I tell myself the truth here. So we can talk about this more. This is a really effective approach to treatment. And if you know about it, you could do this for yourself. Activating event, a really hard exam in one of your classes. Belief. Oh no, I'm never going to pass this. This is so tough. I don't even know. I shouldn't even bother to study. I'm not even going to be able to pass it. I'll just take my best shot at it and plan to take the class over again. Emotional consequences, anxiety, frustration, disappointment, because I'm telling myself I'm a failure. I'm not going to be able to do this. Or activating event, really tough exam coming up. Belief, wow, this is going to be really tough. But if I study and take it one day at a time and get tutoring and break down all the parts that I think are going to be in the exam, talk to the instructor about how I've prepared, see if there's any other suggestions they have about it, and dedicate a lot of my time to this, I might just be able to pass this thing. Emotional consequences, some anxiety, but also some hope. So what you tell yourself right here is hugely important to determine your emotional consequences. And the truth is you have a chance of passing the exam. Everybody has a chance, but you're going to have to put in a lot of footwork and believe in yourself to be able to even get there. So cognitive restructuring is a very valuable thing for each of us to know about. And the truth needs to start with the phrase, I am beginning to realize. Because you don't believe it when you first say it to yourself. But I am beginning to realize gives you the possibility that you can learn to believe it. Okay, if we were in class, I want to give you an example of what would be coming up next. I'd say, hey, get your eye clickers ready. And then I would say, okay, here's the question. Cognitive therapists use cognitive restructuring to, is it change the consequences of behavior, remove the blocks to people's growth, reduce self-defeating thinking, or influence people's brain functioning? And you would click your answer, and then there would be a blank, and then the answer would come up. Did you say reduce self-defeating thinking? Yay, if you did. Which approach wants to change the consequences of behavior? That's right, behaviorism. Which approach wants to remove the blocks to people's growth? That's right, humanism. Which approach wants to influence people's brain functioning? That's right, neuroscience. Okay, well done. Now we'll move on to Beck's cognitive therapy. Aaron Beck and his colleagues developed cognitive therapy. He says cognitive therapists encourage clients to recognize and change errors in their thinking called cognitive distortions. Errors in thinking are cognitive distortions, such as tendencies to magnify negative events like, oh, that person broke up with me. Now nobody will ever want me. And minimize personal accomplishments. Well, of course I passed it. Most of the class did. That affect their moods and impair their behavior. And cognitive therapists ask clients to record the thoughts that are prompted by upsetting events and note the connections between their thoughts and their emotional consequences. Really important. So, cognitive behavior therapy is a learning-based approach to therapy incorporating cognitive and behavioral techniques. It's the most widely used approach to therapy that we have. It integrates therapeutic techniques that help individuals make changes in their overt behavior and underlying thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes. We're almost out of time. You can read that before we run out of time, I hope. Draws on the assumption that thinking patterns and beliefs affect behavior and that changes in these cognitions can produce desirable behavioral and emotional changes. The end.